Sometimes when the wind comes in just right, that kind of dry, dusty Colorado wind that carries the smell of old cottonwood trees and chimney smoke, it takes me back. I'll be standing at my kitchen sink, maybe peeling apples or just staring out at the field behind the house, and then, Lord have mercy, I catch that smell. And, just like that, I'm there. October of 1979. That's the night my whole life turned upside down. Funny how a smell can do that. Stir up memories you thought you'd buried so deep, not even God himself could find them. I was 37. A young woman still, I suppose, though I sure didn't feel young. 3 babies, no savings, a busted-down farmhouse we were trying to hold together with duct tape and hope. Back in those days, we didn't have much. We didn't have a pot to pee in, like my mama used to say. But we had each other. Me, Frank, that was my husband, and our 3 little ones, Ellie, Josh, and baby Jimmy. He'd just turned 2. We were holding it together best we could. Frank worked odd jobs, fixed tractors, anything to keep gas in the truck and food in the pantry. I cooked, cleaned, kept the kids in line. That was just the way things were back then. But that night came howling in like the devil himself. You ever have a moment that splits your life clean in two? Like, there was before, and then there was after. That was my night. The fire. You probably heard about wildfires out west, or maybe seen on TV, big orange walls of flame swallowing up the hills. But this wasn't that. Ours started in the garage. A tiny spark, just a little short in the old wiring where Frank kept his tools. A spark, a breeze, and Lord, the whole place went up like kindling. I haven't spoken much about that time. Not really. Oh, I've told the kids bits and pieces, sure. They remember it different. They thought we were camping, living the adventure life in our 73 Skylark. You young folks wouldn't understand, but when you're a mama and you've got 3 babies staring up at you with big eyes and empty bellies, you learn real fast how to smile through fear. You learn how to make "we're gonna be okay" sound like a lullaby even when your hands are shaking. I've held this story close for years. Never felt quite right talking about it. Maybe I didn't want folks' pity. Maybe I thought no one really needed to hear it. But lately, I don't know. Maybe it's the way the world's going. Maybe it's all this rushing around people do, all these big houses and busy lives, and yet so many folks feeling so lost, so alone. And I think maybe, just maybe, if someone hears what we went through, and how we came out the other side not bitter, not broken, but stronger, maybe it'll mean something. So I'm gonna tell it now. All of it. The fire, the fear, the car we called home, the nights I cried without making a sound, and the kindness of strangers that wrapped around us like a blanket. It's not a fairy tale. It's not even a happy story all the way through. But it's true. And sometimes that's better than happy. It's the kind of truth that sticks to your ribs, like stew on a cold night. So, if you're still listening, I want you to come sit a spell. Bring a cup of tea. Let's talk. 'Cause there's a story I've kept to myself for many, many years. But that smell in the wind brought it all back, and now I think it's time I shared it. Let me tell you about the night the fire came, and the days we learned what it really means to be home. You know, back when I was a little girl, the world just moved slower. Not because the clocks ticked any different, I suppose, but because people took their time. Took time to talk to each other, to wave from the porch, to sit on the stoop in the evenings and listen to the crickets. I grew up just outside of Delta, Colorado, not far from where I raised my own babies later on. My daddy was a quiet man, worked the land sunup to sundown. Mama kept the house neat as a pin, always smelled like fresh bread and vinegar cleaner. We weren't rich by any stretch. Lord, we barely scraped by. But we had chickens, a garden, and a radio that crackled out Patsy Cline on Saturday nights. And somehow, that felt like enough. I was the youngest of 3 girls. My sisters were taller, prettier, louder. I was the quiet one, always with my nose in a book or following Mama around the kitchen asking questions she didn't always have time to answer. I used to sit on the back steps in my bare feet, toes dusty, watching the sun set over the alfalfa fields, thinking about what my life might look like someday. I dreamed real simple. I wanted a little house with lace curtains, a man who loved me gentle, and babies lots of am. I wasn't trying to go to Hollywood or be anybody famous. I just wanted what Mama had, minus the constant worry about money. I thought, back then, if you worked hard and were kind to people, life would be kind right back. I truly believe that. I remember my first real heartache came when I was 17. A boy named Calvin. He had curly hair and hands that smelled like motor oil. He kissed me under the bleachers after a football game and said he'd marry me someday. But he left for Denver and never wrote back. I cried for a week, maybe 2, then baked a pie and decided life would go on. That's what you did back then. You didn't fall apart. You put your apron back on and kept moving. Still, I guess a little piece of me learned that people don't always stay. Even the ones who promised to. Then came Frank. Lord, that man was trouble and tenderness all rolled up together. He had a laugh like gravel and a heart so big, sometimes I didn't know what to do with it. We met at the county fair. He bought me cotton candy and told me he liked the way I folded my hands when I listened. I married him at 19. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but we had dreams. Big ones. He wanted a workshop, and I wanted a kitchen full of Sunday dinners and noisy kids. We moved into his folks' old farmhouse. Drafty, creaky, smelled like mice and old cedar, but it was ours. That place became our beginning. In those early days, I truly thought we had it all. We'd make love with the windows open, listening to the owls. I'd hang laundry while Frank hammered away in the garage. We didn't go out much, but we had dances in the kitchen, with bare feet and dish towels over our shoulders. Every time a baby came, we cried and laughed all in the same breath. I didn't mind the struggle. I figured hard times were just part of the story, part of the glue that holds a family close. And maybe I was right. Maybe that's why the memory of that fire hurts so deep. Because we built something real, something tender. And to watch it burn, to smell your life going up in smoke, well, it makes you remember every detail of what came before. Every quiet moment, every promise, every birthday cake and lullaby and slam of the screen door. I guess what I'm saying is, before the fire, before the car, before we lost everything, we had something so simple, so pure, it makes my chest ache just thinking about it. We had hope, and we believed in each other. I was a girl once who believed that if you loved hard enough and kept your head down, the world would take care of you right back. But life don't always work that way, and yet, somehow it still gives you what you need. You know, I wasn't looking for love when I met Frank Carter. I had my hands full trying to finish high school, keep Mama from worrying, and help Daddy with the chickens after he threw out his back that winter. I had dreams, sure, little ones, like I told you, but I figured love would come when it was good and ready, not when I was wearing my worst dress and sweating through my blouse in the middle of July. But life don't care what you're wearing or if your hair's a mess. Sometimes it just happens. It was the summer of '61. I'd just turned 17, still full of opinions and sweet tea, working part-time at Dell's Hardware to save for a sewing machine. That's where I first saw him. He came in for bolts or brake fluid or something. That didn't matter. Lord, I couldn't tell you to this day what he was looking for. What I do remember is his hands, stained black from grease, calloused strong. He looked like somebody who fixed things, not just machines, but bigger things. And when he smiled, well, Land sakes alive, it was like sunlight through dusty blinds. I felt it before I understood it. You know how that is? That strange flutter in your chest like your ribs are too small for your heart. I couldn't explain it, not even to myself. My mouth went dry, and I dropped the little box of washers I was stocking. They scattered all over the floor, and I just stood there like a fool, blushing so hard I thought my ears would pop off. And he knelt right down, started picking them up with those oil-stained fingers, and said, "Well now, that's one way to get a fella's attention." I just about melted into the linoleum. That night, I walked home with my cheeks still burning. I didn't know his name, didn't know where he was from, but I knew. Something had just shifted in my world, like a plate sliding underneath the ground, quiet but powerful. I laid in bed that night staring at the ceiling fan, hearing the dogs barking down the road, and all I could think was, he saw me. Not just looked at me, but saw me like I was more than just the quiet girl behind the counter. He came back 2 days later, bought a pack of sandpaper, and asked if I liked swing dancing. I told him I'd never tried it. He said, "Then I reckon we'll learn together." That Saturday night, we danced in the barn behind his cousin's house, and I stepped all over his boots, and he just laughed like it was the best thing that ever happened to him. That laugh, I swear, that's what made me fall in love. Not his shoulders, not his hands, not even those deep-set eyes, just that unshakable, belly-deep, can't-help-it kind of laugh that made the whole world feel less heavy. Frank changed everything. He didn't sweep me off my feet, not like in those dime store romance novels. He grounded me, made me feel like I was standing on solid ground even when the world got wobbly. He wasn't perfect, Lord no. He had a temper, and he never remembered to take off his boots at the door. But he was good, good all the way through. You know how some people are sweet on the surface, but bitter underneath? Frank was the opposite. Took time to know him, but once you did, you found gold. Looking back now, I think that was the first time I ever really felt my life leaning into something bigger. I didn't have the words for it then, but my bones knew. My skin knew. My soul leaned forward. You young folks wouldn't understand, maybe, but there comes a moment when the air around you shifts, and you know without a doubt, everything's different now. Nothing will ever be the same. That moment, for me, was Frank Carter with his motor oil hands and kind eyes. He was the spark, the beginning, and as you'll soon hear, he'd become both my shelter and the reason I'd have to learn how to survive the storm. You know, when you're young and in love, there's a kind of shine over everything. Like the hard edges of life are blurred, just a little, by the way he holds your hand or the way the babies laugh in the bathtub. And I think part of me wanted to believe that was enough, that love and grit could carry you through anything. But life, well, it don't always let you keep the shine. Things started changing after our second child, Josh, was born. Frank's back gave out one winter hauling hay for the neighbors' cows, and after that he couldn't do the same kind of work. He tried, Lord knows, but I could see it wore him down. He'd come in from the garage with his shirt soaked through, leaning against the sink while I wiped the grease from his neck, and he'd say, "I ain't what I used to be, Mabel." I'd kiss his forehead and tell him, "You're more than enough." But truth be told, I was scared. Bills were stacking up. The roof leaked in 3 places. Our oldest, Ellie, needed new shoes, and I couldn't even afford flour to bake bread. We made do with what we had, but what we had was getting thinner every month. And then came the letter. The bank. They were calling in the loan Frank's daddy had taken out on the farm years before he passed. We didn't even know about it. I remember reading that letter at the kitchen table, my hands trembling, the edges of the paper cutting into my fingers like the words themselves wanted to hurt me. Foreclosure. That was the word. I didn't even know what to say to Frank. I just sat there while the kids chased each other in the next room and felt like the floor had disappeared underneath me. We tried to fight it, of course. Went to the courthouse. Spoke to the bank. Begged for more time. But when you don't have money or connections, nobody really hears you. I'll tell you what, that's a kind of humiliation that sticks. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that settles in your bones. The shame of walking into church and knowing folks are whispering. The pride you swallow when you borrow $10 from your sister and swear you'll pay it back, even when you know deep down you probably won't. That was also the year I started working nights at the diner out on Highway 92. I get home just before sunrise, make breakfast for the kids, and nap with baby Jimmy curled on my chest. Sometimes Frank and I wouldn't even see each other, except to pass off the car keys and give a tired smile. We were living like ghosts in our own house. And still, I didn't tell nobody how heavy it had gotten inside me. Not even Frank. I didn't know how to say I was scared we were drowning. I didn't know how to ask for help without feeling like I was failing. What made it worse was the look in Ellie's eyes. She was just 9, but she could feel the tension. One day she asked if we'd have to move away and leave her school. I wanted to lie. I really did, but all I could do was hold her close and whisper, "Mama's trying, baby. I'm trying real hard." And Lord help me, I was. But trying don't always mean savon. By the time October came round, that cold, windy October of '79, the pressure had built up like a storm cloud just hovering over us. I'd wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air, heart pounding like a drum. I kept praying for a break, some mercy, a miracle. But instead, what came was fire. And maybe that's what makes life so strange. Sometimes the thing that destroys everything is also the thing that cracks you wide open and shows you what's really inside. I remember the smell first. It wasn't like campfire, no, it was sharper, meaner. It burned your throat when you breathed in, made your eyes sting before you even saw the flames. It was somewhere between melting plastic and scorched wood, the smell of things that shouldn't burning. And I knew. I just knew. You get that kind of knowing in your gut as a mother. That primal alarm bell. And Lord, it was ringing so loud that night I can still feel the echo in my chest. It was late October. Windy as all get out, the kind of wind that rattled the windows and pulled at the eaves like it was trying to get inside. The kids were all down, Jimmy curled up at my side, Josh sleeping sideways with his feet hanging off the bed, and Ellie tucked in with her favorite quilt, the one Mama had made before she passed. Frank was in the garage, tinkering like always. I'd just finished washing up the dinner dishes when I caught it, that smell, and then the light. Just the faintest flicker at the edge of the kitchen window. Orange, dancing. I didn't even think. I just ran. My bare feet hit the floorboards, and I grabbed Jimmy with one hand, hollering for the others. "Get up! Out! We have to go." My voice was shrill, cracking in a way I'd never heard before. The kids were crying, disoriented. Ellie wouldn't let go of her quilt. Josh was shouting for his daddy. By the time we got out the door, the garage was already gone, swallowed in flame, and the fire had leapt, greedy as sin, right onto the side of the house. I remember the sound, wood snapping, windows cracking, like bones breaking. Frank came running from around back, his face covered in ash, eyes wild. He grabbed Josh, threw open the car doors. We were all screaming, moving like people half awake in a nightmare. I looked back once, just once, and that's the image that stayed with me all these years. My home, the only one I ever had, lit up like a torch against the dark. Curtains burning, roof sagging, and the clock, that old pendulum clock from Frank's Mama, falling off the wall in slow motion, shattering on the floor. I swear to you, it was like time stopped right then. Everything went silent in my head. No screams, no wind. Just the sound of my own heart beating like it might burst. We stood out in that field, wrapped in whatever blankets we'd grabbed, watching it all go. The kids were sobbing. Frank held his head in his hands. And me, I just stood there, still, empty, numb. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shouting. I was just gone. Because in that moment, I lost more than a roof and walls. I lost my baby's first drawings, my mama's letters, the dress I wore when I married Frank, the quilt from Ellie's crib, the smell of cinnamon I could never quite get out of the kitchen floorboards. It wasn't just a house. It was my life in ashes. And the worst part? I couldn't fall apart. I had 3 little faces staring up at me, begging me with their eyes not to crumble. So I didn't. I held Jimmy tighter. I pulled Ellie close. I put my hand on Frank's back, even when I felt like I might break in half. I told them, we're still here. We're together. That's what matters. And I believed it. I had to. But inside, I felt like I'd failed. Failed as a mother, as a wife, as a woman trying to keep her family afloat. That night changed me, broke something open, not in a clean way. It cracked me jagged, like a window that spattered all the way through but still hanging in the frame. I didn't know how we'd go on. I just knew we had to. That fire didn't just take our home. It took the last bit of safety I thought we had. And from that moment on, survival wasn't just about money or shelter. It was about holding on to each other, even in the ash and ruin, and trying to believe, somehow, that there was still a road ahead. The strangest thing after a fire is the silence. You think it would be loud, with all the memories screaming, with grief banging pots and pans in your heart. But it's not. It's quiet. So quiet it hums. The kind of quiet that fills your ears until even your own breathing feels like an interruption. That's how it was for me in the days after. Quiet, empty, cold, even when the sun was out. We parked the Skylark just past the edge of town, near the old feed store where nobody bothered us. Frank and I laid down the back seats, stuffed whatever we'd managed to grab into the trunk, and made a bed out of blankets that still smelled like smoke. The kids didn't understand at first. Jimmy thought we were on a camping trip. Ellie kept asking when we'd go back home. And Josh, he just stared out the window most days, silent like his daddy. And I felt hollowed out, like a tree that had burned from the inside. Still standing, but no longer alive in the middle. I remember one morning, it must have been 2 or 3 days after the fire, I stepped out of the car before anyone woke up. The ground was hard, frosty. My knees ached. I just stood there, looking up at the sky, trying to pray, but not knowing what to say. I wasn't mad at God, not yet, but I sure didn't know if he was listening. I whispered, "What now?" That was it. That was all I could manage. Not a hymn, not a verse, just a question. We started living in patterns. Park here, sleep there, cook soup from a can on a little gas stove we borrowed, wash at the church sink if nobody was round, try not to draw attention, smile for the kids even when your lips are too tired. It's strange how quickly your dignity adjusts. One week you're fussing about a stain on your blouse. The next, you're just glad your kids' socks are dry. People didn't look us in the eye much. Folks in town knew what happened, but most kept their distance. Maybe they didn't know what to say. Maybe they didn't want the reminder that life can fall apart so fast. And I'll be honest, there was a bitterness growing in me. Not loud, not ugly, just a quiet resentment. I'd done everything right. I'd worked hard. I'd loved my husband. I'd raised my children with care. And still, we'd lost everything. That'll shake your bones, I'll tell you that. I started wondering if I'd ever feel whole again, If I'd ever sit at a kitchen table and drink coffee in peace. If I'd ever have curtains to open or a porch swing to hold me. I missed the sounds of our life. The creak of the floor in the hallway. The clatter of dishes. The little hum Frank used to do when he worked. All of it gone. And in its place, silence. Silence and the weight of survival. Something in me changed out there. I stopped dreaming. Not because I didn't want to, but because it hurt too much to want anything. I focused on keeping the kids warm, keeping Frank from breaking down, keeping my hands moving, even if my heart felt stuck. That's what a mother does, I guess. You keep walking, even when you're walking through ashes. My faith didn't vanish, but it shifted. It stopped being soft and gentle. It got quieter, grittier, less about a skin and more about enduring. I still believed in goodness. I did, but I stopped expecting it to come easy. And somewhere in that stillness, in that long, aching quiet, I began to understand that I wasn't the same woman anymore. The girl who once believed that love and hard work were enough, she was gone. In her place stood someone tougher. Tired, yes. Weathered, yes. But still standing. And sometimes, that's the only victory you get. Hope don't usually come crashing through the door, dressed in lights and music. No, sir. It tiptoes in, like a soft breeze you didn't notice, till your hair moves. That's how it came for me. Quiet. Small, but real enough to make me breathe a little deeper. I remember the moment almost better than the fire, 'cause it was the first time in weeks I felt like the ground might hold me up again. We were still living in the Skylark, parked that week behind the old Baptist church near the highway. The pastor had given us quiet permission, said we could use the fellowship hall's washroom at night so long as we didn't draw attention. I'd sneak the kids in one at a time, wash 'em with a rag, hush 'em when they giggled too loud. That place, cold tile floors and paper towel smells, became our nightly ritual. And somehow in the hum of those fluorescent lights, I started to feel like we hadn't disappeared completely. One morning, I came out early to fix breakfast, if you can call warm beans and stale bread breakfast, and I saw her. Miss Pearson. She'd been my 7th grade history teacher. A sharp woman with white curls, big glasses, and a voice that could slice butter. She was standing by the trunk of her station wagon with a big cardboard box. I figured she was dropping off donations or church stuff. But then she turned, looked me square in the eye, and said, "Mabel Carter, you still taking care of everybody but yourself." I laughed. Lord, I laughed. I hadn't heard my own laugh in weeks, and it sounded strange, like it had to push through something to get out. She walked right up and put her hand on my shoulder, gentle, steady. And she said, "I brought some things. Coats, socks, books for the little ones. I remember how smart you were in school, Mabel. You always showed up, even when your shoes were falling apart. I figured if anybody could make it through a fire, it'd be you." I don't know what it was about that moment. Maybe it was the touch. Maybe it was someone calling me by my name, not that poor woman or the one who lost everything. Just Mabel. Like I was still me. Like I hadn't vanished into the smoke. I thanked her, Lord knows I did, but she didn't want thanks. She just nodded and said, "Keep going. The world's still tuning dot." Then she got in her car and drove off, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. But it wasn't. Not to me. That box, it had a coloring book for Jimmy, and I swear he held it like it was treasure. Ellie got a coat with buttons shaped like flowers, and she twirled in it like she'd just walked into a fairy tale. Josh found a book about fire trucks and told me, "I'm gonna drive one someday." I didn't cry in front of them. But later that night, sitting in the driver's seat while they slept, I let the tears come. Not from sorrow, not this time, but from relief. That maybe, just maybe, we weren't alone after all. The next morning, I walked into the church office and asked if they needed help in the kitchen. I don't know where the courage came from. Maybe it had been buried under all the fear. The secretary looked surprised, but she said, "Actually, yes." And just like that, I had a place to go. Somewhere I could stir a pot, wash a dish, and feel like a person again. It was a tiny step, but sometimes tiny steps are the biggest kind. They lead you out of the dark, one careful foot at a time. That's when I started to believe again, not in some grand rescue, but in kindness. In people who show up with coats and warm words. In work, in rhythm, in the way the world gently invites you back in. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. It was sometime in early spring when it happened. Not a big moment, not loud. No lightning in the sky or music swelling in the background. Just me, a quiet morning, and a choice I'd been walking toward without knowing it. The kids were off with Frank helping some church folks unload supplies, and I had a few minutes alone in that little church basement we'd been calling home. I remember sitting at the table, sunlight's filling through the tiny window, catching all the dust in the air like gold. That light, it was soft, patient, and for the first time in a long while, so was I. I was holding onto a box, one of the only things we'd saved from the fire. Not much inside. A half-burned photograph of our wedding day, a broken music box that used to play "You Are My Sunshine," some bits of fabric from Mama's quilt that Ellie had managed to pull from the floor before the flames reached her room. Just little scraps of what used to be, and I'd clung to that box like it held my identity. Like losing, it meant losing who I was. But that morning, I looked at it different. Not as a treasure chest, but as a weight. I can't explain it, not really. I just knew I couldn't carry it anymore. Not if I wanted to keep going. Not if I wanted to feel like more than a ghost of who I'd been before the fire. So I stood up, walked out back, where the church kept the garbage bins, and where nobody could see me if I cried. And I opened that box. One piece at a time, I let go. I held that photograph, half scorched, Frank's arm around me, my face turned to the camera like I didn't quite believe I was loved yet. And I kissed it. Then I dropped it in the bin. I ran my fingers across the torn piece of quilt, remembering Mama's hands, how she used to hum while she stitched. I closed my eyes, whispered thank you, and let it go too. And then, that music box. I almost kept it, but I turned the little crank one last time, just to see if it still made sound. And when it didn't, I placed it on top and shut the lid. And there it was. My past, burning long before the fire ever touched it, finally laid to rest. You see, I'd been holding on to more than things. I'd been carrying guilt, shame, the kind of shame you don't speak out loud, the kind that whispers, if only you'd done more, if only you'd been smarter, if only you were enough. But that morning, I made a choice. I looked my pain in the face and said, you happened, but you don't get to define me. I didn't have fancy words. I didn't pray some holy prayer. I just breathed in, breathed out, and told myself I choose to live, not just survive, not just get through. Live, without bitterness, without pretending, without dragging the past behind me like a busted wagon. That choice didn't fix everything. We still had long nights and cold mornings. But it changed me. I started standing taller. I smiled more, not because everything was fine, but because I'd finally accepted it didn't have to be. I began to forgive myself. For the fire, for the fear, for all the times I broke down in silence, because I didn't want my children to see me weak. And maybe the most important thing, I stopped wishing for what was and started thanking God for what still was. For Frank's steady hands, for Ellie's stubborn fire, for the way Josh took care of Jimmy when I couldn't, for warm bread at the church kitchen, for breath in my lungs. I'd lost so much, but I hadn't lost myself. Not really. She'd just been waitin' for me to stop running and turn around. And I did. I chose to live. Without complaints. Without regrets. Just forward. Sometimes when I'm sittin' on the porch in the early evening, coffee in hand, sun sinkin', just so behind the cottonwoods, I get to thinkin' about all we lost and all we found. You know, back then, I thought the worst thing that could happen to a person was to lose everything. But now I see clearer. The real tragedy is never losing anything. It's never truly seeing what you have. Not until it's gone, or until it saves your life. I used to think home was a place for walls, a stove that clicks when it lights, the hum of a fridge, the smell of bread rising. But after the fire, after the car, after the church basement, and all those long nights, I learned something. Home ain't a place. It's people. It's memory. It's the sound of your baby's breathing steady beside you when you don't know what tomorrow holds. It's someone reaching across the dark to hold your hand, not with answers, but just so you know you're not alone in it. You can rebuild walls, but it's harder to rebuild trust, or a laughter, or the quiet peace of knowing you're loved exactly as you are, even in ash-covered clothes and worn-out shoes. That's the treasure. That's what you hold on to when everything else burns away. And I'll tell you this, hardship don't make you stronger. Choosing to keep going does. Hardship just shows you where the cracks are. But it's what you do next that fills them. I thought I was weak so many times, thought I'd broken beyond repair. But turns out, I wasn't broken, I was being reshaped. The old me, the one who tried so hard to do it all right, to keep everything together with tape and willpower, she had to step aside. So I could learn to live with open hands instead of clenched fists. You see, I stopped waiting for things to go back to normal. Waiting for a clean kitchen and the right time. Waiting for someone to say, it's all okay now. 'Cause that moment, it may never come. And if you wait too long, you'll miss the life you still have. Even if it's messy, even if it's painful, even if it looks nothing like what you pictured. So, maybe you're listening right now, thinking about your own life. Maybe you're holding your breath for a sign or dragging around something heavy or too tired to name. Let me tell you what I wish someone told me. You don't need everything to start over. You just need breath in your body and a little bit of truth in your pocket. That's enough. Truly. I look at my children now, all grown. Ellie helps families find shelter. Josh fights fires, like the one that took our home. Jimmy teaches math to kids who think they're not smart enough and shows them they are. They all remember that skylark. Not with shame, but with pride. Because that car didn't break us. It held us together. And me? I still cook too much, still hum while I fold laundry. Frank's gone now, bless his soul, but I still talk to him when the wind picks up. Still thank him for teaching me how to love through the hard parts. And I sit here, older now, slower, but not bitter, not empty, just grateful. So, if you're waiting on a sign, maybe this is it. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for the life you lost and start seeing the life that's still here. The people still reach in for you. The quiet goodness still whispering your name. You survived the fire, honey. Now don't forget to live. If you're still here, if you've sat with me through the story, thank you. I know it's been a lot. Maybe more than you expected when you clicked play. I reckon you thought it might just be an old lady rambling about her past. And, well, I suppose in a way, that's exactly what it is. But it's also more than that. Because this story, my story, isn't just about the fire, or the car, or even the loss. It's about what we keep carrying, what we pass on, what we find again after we think it's gone. I don't tell this for pity. I tell it because I believe stories are meant to be handed down like good quilts, stitched from pain and beauty, both. You wrap yourself in And suddenly you're not so cold. Suddenly you feel like someone, somewhere, understands. That's all I hope this does for you. That maybe something in this old voice of mine makes you feel a little less alone. You know, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd given up. If we'd let that night define us forever. If Frank had stopped trying. If I'd let the shame swallow me whole. But we didn't. We chose to move. To try. To believe in small things, a warm cup of soup, a coat from a neighbor, a child's laugh in the back seat of a too small Buick. Those were the bricks we used to build again. And it wasn't perfect. Lord knows it was messy. But it was real. It was ours. That's the thing I want to leave with you. Life ain't about what you build. It's about how you hold on when it all falls down. How you keep loving when your heart's sore. How you show up day after day even when the story ain't going the way you thought it would. That's the real strength. That's the kind of thing they don't put in textbooks or talk about on the news. But it's what holds the world together. And listen, I don't pretend to know your story. I don't know what you've lost. I don't know what you're carrying. But I do know this. Pain has a funny way of turning us inward, like we're supposed to handle it all alone. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to. We weren't built to go through fire alone. We were built to hold each other up, one long day at a time. So let me ask you something, if you don't mind. What are you still waiting for? To forgive someone? To start again? To call your mama? To love without a guarantee? I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's worth it. Maybe it's time to stop carrying the ashes and start planting something new. Something small, just enough to bloom come spring. Sometimes, when the wind picks up just right late in the evening, I sit out on my porch, and I swear I can hear Frank's laugh. That low, gravelly chuckle, like he's just out of sight, watching the sun go down with me. And sometimes, I talk to him. Just a few words. A thank you. A you'd be proud. And sometimes, it feels like he answers. Not in words, but in feeling. Like I'm not quite alone, and maybe that sounds silly. But love, real love, don't end with the fire. It lingers. It grows roots in the places loss can't reach. And if you've ever loved someone like that, well, you know exactly what I mean. So I'll leave you with this. Do you think real love always finds its way back? I've had a lifetime to think on it. And sometimes, in the quiet, I think maybe it does.